We are Rogue Media Sports.
In the California Road Trip Republic, we believe you take adventure for a ride. Whether coastal cruising, mountain motoring, or redwood roaming, discover beauty around every turn. Your California road trip can kick off from anywhere.
Starting route.
But it should always start at visitcalifornia.com. Then buckle up, crank those tunes, and ride with us in the California Road Trip Republic.
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
It is the Doomsday Podcast. This is an emergency podcast. Ed Werder, Matt Mosley over Frito Nation Productions. You can hear Werder there having a big evening here. 2-1 decision. The 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals panel in New Orleans has granted the league's emergency request to set aside an injunction and ordered a district court in Texas to dismiss Zeke Elliott's case. Ed, we've got so much lined up. We've got two of the preeminent legal sports scholars in our country ready to both go, and sometimes they have differing views on these things. So we're going to give our listeners all sorts of views. But first, we'll give our views. But Ed, when the news came down today that the NFL couldn't wait, Ed, did you notice that was it Joe Lockhart? You know, they have several spokespersons for different things. They'll go to Brian, what's his name?
McCarthy.
Brian McCarthy for something. Where our other man? Greg Aiello. I hadn't heard from him in a while.
He got promoted.
Okay. Oh, you don't have to be a spokesperson if you get promoted. So Joe Lockhart, he said, yeah, the suspension begins immediately. It's like, even though they're not playing this week, they wanted no bones about it. He's suspended again. Ed, this is a season that's already seemingly headed in the wrong direction. Cowboys at 2-3. What is your just initial take as we get ready for a emergency podcast?
Well, I think, we've talked about the fact that the Cowboys have this established formula for winning, and to me, on both sides of the ball, that formula is built around Zeke Elliott. And, they've struggled to run the football with Elliott because of the changes that they've been forced to make on the offensive line. I think particularly Chaz Green and Jonathan Cooper at left guard have created a real issue for this football team on offense. I just don't know, even though they have Alfred Morris and Darren McFadden, who will now be active again, I just don't see any way that they can replace what Zeke Elliott does. He's a 3-down player. He's a power guy. He's a speed guy. He can break plays and create open field situations for himself. He helps protect the defense that's been truly awful to this point. So I think this is the death knell for the Cowboys if they have to play the rest of this or the next 6 weeks without Ezekiel Elliott, assuming, again, that he doesn't go to court, which we expect he will, and win a quick injunction and allow himself back on the field again. I think this is a terrible outcome for the Cowboys, but not one that's unexpected.
All right, big show planned for you. We had to plan it quickly, and just so you know, Ed, you can back me up on this or correct me if I'm not right. I believe if the suspension did start immediately as it has, and Zeke didn't fight this thing anymore, and the suspension started, he would be able to return in time for the November 30th ball game against the Washington Redskins.
Right, he would miss Week 7 against the 49ers, Week 8 against the Redskins, Week 9 against the Chiefs, Week 10 against the Falcons, Week 11 against the Eagles, and Week 12 against the Chargers. Some of those teams, the Chiefs and the Falcons in particular, and the Eagles as well, rank among the top 5 offensive teams in football. And so the Cowboys are going to be forced to score a lot of points in those games, and now to do it, in my mind, without their best player.
Yeah, and oh, by the way, their owner continues to have meetings with the players about whether or not they're going to be allowed to do a protest. Obviously, he's forbidden that for the time being. The NFL will meet on this. Lots to get to. Ed, I thought this was going to be a relaxing bye week. It is nothing like that.
I thought you were going on a hiatus again.
Yeah, I love a good hiatus. We are moments away from starting the emergency podcast this evening with Ezekiel Elliott, the ruling coming down out of New Orleans. I want to remind everybody, thank you, Draft.com, for being so big time and being our partner. Not too late to join the 500,000 people that have already downloaded Draft.com this season. Get to play in a real live snake draft, but you're done in under 5 minutes, and they last for just 1 week. You can join right now. Week 6, here we go. The best part, play for cold hard cash, and get this, your chances of winning are 80% better than on the salary cap sites. All new players get a free entry into a real money draft when you make your first deposit, but you have to use the promo code DOOMS, DOOMS. That's right, play a real money game for free just by using the promo code DOOMS. And get it even better, Draft is so sure you'll love it that they're even offering Doomsday listeners a money-back guarantee up to $100. Just search Draft in your app store or go to draft.com and come play for free right now with the promo code DOOMS. Do it. I've had fun with this. Let's get started. Frito, play the music. And it is an emergency podcast, Doomsday. Thanks for continuing to sign up. You can go to Apple Podcast, iTunes, as you might like to call it. Sign up for free. Stitcher, so many different ways you could be a part of us. Google Play, iTunes, all the different various ways. Art19, in fact. Appreciate the Art19 folks. And Ed, as we get ready to, we've lined up a couple of our preeminent legal scholars in the country, not named me. I mean, I did go to law school. Didn't quite make it all the way through, but we have some guys that know what they're talking about. And, man, a couple of these guys have been really dead on a lot of the way. This is going to get really fascinating because there are a couple of different places where if the legal machinations continue, there could be a transfer back to Texas. And Daniel Wallach will talk to us about that. Michael McCann, a guy you've known for years.
Who's been a guest on the show.
Who's been a guest on the show.
This topic.
Will also be on with us. Now, just so you know, as we tape this on Thursday evening, after the news came down a little bit earlier this afternoon, Ed, this is from Zeke Elliott's attorney, Frank Salzano. I don't know if you know Frank. We're not going to have Frank on tonight. We are currently exploring, I quote him, all of our legal options and will make a decision as to what is the best course of action in the next few days. Ed, is there a scenario you could see? I hear people sort of, in the past it's been like, there's no way Zeke's going to stop fighting. Zeke's going to keep following this thing. He's going to see it all the way through. Is there any chance in your mind where instead of going to the Southern District of New York and trying to file this injunction to keep playing, that the Cowboys go, you know what, let's cut our losses, Zeke. Let's just let's move ahead and take the suspension now. You see that if you're going to put a percentage on it, what would your percentage be on that?
I assume that his stance has always been that he's completely innocent of this and wants to vindicate himself, and he wants to be available to play for the Cowboys this year and beyond. So given that, and given the fact that the judge's ruling today in New Orleans was very specific that it was an issue of jurisdiction, it was because the NFLPA prematurely, before Harold Henderson rendered his arbitration appeal hearing, that they filed in court. They didn't rule on the due process elements, and so I think because of that, because he's going to want to be heard on the NFL not allowing a fair protocol, that I think he'll continue to fight this. But your point, I think, is interesting from a football point of view. Michael Irvin said something really interesting when this first happened, and that was the only way you fight this all the way to the end and try with all your might to keep Zeke Elliott on the field this season is if you think this is your year. And I believe 5 weeks ago, the Cowboys thought this was their year. They went 13-3 with a rookie quarterback and a rookie running back last year. They thought they could win it all this year. Now they're 2-3, and they're behind the Philadelphia Eagles in the division. So now do they still think that's a possibility? Does it at any point enter their minds to take the suspension this year because they feel they're out of contention, that they can't achieve their goals when the season started? I mean, to me, the worst thing that could happen would be for them to have Zeke Elliott all year and wind up 6-10 or 4-12 or whatever, and then you start next season without Zeke Elliott for the first 6 games, kind of like what the Patriots did with Tom Brady. But they won the Super Bowl, when Brady was continuing to play.
Yeah, that makes total sense what you're saying, and I think the Cowboys will hopefully press on. I think one of the reasons is I believe Jerry Jones really had a feel for how this thing was going to go, and it didn't initially go how he wanted. I think he'll encourage Zeke and the NFLPA and everybody to continue to fight it, although now Jerry's got other things on his mind, like trying to lead the NFL in sanctions. We're going to shut you down. You're not going to play if you don't stand for the anthem or you disrespect the flag. Ultimatums, edicts, whatever you want to call it. Jerry's gotten all into this. This is that's the thing with the Cowboys. The Cowboys are one of the rare teams that can go into a bye week and still be the most interesting team in the league. Even in a bye week situation, you had the Jerry thing. That's been an enormous story this week on several fronts. And now you have this thing with Zeke Elliott and the Fifth Circuit coming down with this ruling. I agree with you. I think they're going to fight it. Now, what I wonder is, and it's going to be so interesting, there's so much legal stuff we're going to get into and see where all this is going. And I'll say this, one thing Daniel Wallach, who's going to be joining us a little later in our podcast, is going to tell you, Ed, he still sees very big distinctions between the Brady Deflategate case and this one. And I think that's the biggest thing he keeps coming back to. This is not I think we have a tendency in our analysis of this to go, in the end, the NFL is going to win. It's about how many games can you get right now. And he doesn't think that. He does not think. He thinks that protocol breakdown that you referenced is a big enough thing.
The evidentiary part of it.
Yes.
Discovery and allowing Elliott and his legal team and the NFLPA to have access to the league investigator and to Goodell to determine what Goodell knew and whether he knew that the lead investigator, the only person to ever interview the woman who made the allegations of domestic violence against Zeke Elliott that began all of this, that she would have recommended no punishment whatsoever for Ezekiel Elliott. Instead, he got a 6-game suspension, and now it's gone back and forth. So it will be interesting to see how they rule, if the court ever gets to that point, how they rule on whether the NFL violated its own protocol. I think everybody believes, well, maybe Daniel Wallach doesn't, but I think the vast majority of people believe, based on history, that the NFL is eventually going to prevail because of the CBA allows Roger Goodell wide discrepancy and broad powers in disciplining players in situations like this.
Isn't it interesting, Ed, that when you really, you look at Brady, you look at the Adrian Peterson case, you look at this one, and in a sense, as much as Goodell's horrible at this stuff and botches a lot of these investigations, he does win in the end because of this CBA.
Right.
I mean, a lot of times he ends up winning, and so it's going to be...
he didn't win on Bountygate. They eventually had to, get...
Was it Tagliabue who came...
Tagliabue, the former commissioner, back involved, and he arbitrated this, and the Saints players actually wound up playing most of the season.
Yeah, it is. But the point you made earlier, I think, is a great one, is that here they are at 2-3. And what they had hoped was to get every ounce out of Zeke they could. And they just never, for the life of them, thought they would be sitting here, a loss at home to the Rams. I mean, it's a loss at home to the Packers isn't that embarrassing. And the Rams are an improving team, but they're not great. You're not supposed to lose at home to these Rams. And so to be sitting there 2-3 when they've been able to get all these games out of Zeke puts them in a weird spot. Now, Ed, if this thing holds up and they can't get the injunction, is we know what the schedule is. You read it earlier. San Francisco's next. I think they can get that done without Zeke. I really do. Whether you're putting McFadden or Alfred, I mean, every time you hand the ball to Alfred, he's good for about 70 yards. I would feed this man continually. But when you, that's right. Do the
Zeke feed
Ed
me,
is.
feed
I
me
wish
thing.
this
I'm
is why we
doing
need
that.
video.
We do
Ed's
need
doing
video.
the feed me.
I'm really
sign.
doing it well too.
I'm
So
seeing
better.
this- I'm seeing this in college now. The college kids are doing this. Like, feed me. Zeke has had a big impact, negative impact on some. But now, Ed, the impact on the Cowboys, if he's not able to go the next, if he has to miss that 6 games, what do you think it is? How profound is this impact to the offense?
Well, 2 things. The Cowboys want to be an effective first down running team, and in their 2 best seasons under Jason Garrett, they've led the NFL in first down rushing, once under DeMarco Murray and once with Ezekiel Elliott, both of whom led the league in rushing those respective years. They like to do that, dominate in the run game, control the time of possession to minimize the number of plays of defense, which we've seen be badly exposed by even Jared Goff of the Rams, to protect them and minimize the number of snaps that they take. So I talked to a couple people over at the Star after this happened, and they, amazingly, one of them told me, I think we'll still be okay on offense. I still worry more about us being able to stop people. That being said, there's a recognition, I think, that Dak Prescott is going to have to do more. And he's going to have to do more in all likelihood with a less productive running game, which is going to put him in more challenging down and distance situations. Teams that would ordinarily load the box to try to stop the run are now going to be able to drop more people into coverage. And I think they will also be able now to perhaps put more pressure on him. We know one of the great things that Zeke Elliott does is that he can play on 3rd downs as well as 1st and 2nd downs because he does block well and because he is a good receiver. The Cowboys don't have any one back now who can play all 3 downs in my mind. And then I talked to a defensive coordinator in the NFC about his viewpoint of, so how now would you defend Dallas in a way that's maybe different if you have Zeke Elliott involved? And he said, to me, the quarterback is as much an issue as any. They're most effective when they have success on 1st down, so that's where Elliott helps the most. A run block for 3-yard gain turns into an 8-yard gain with Elliott. He breaks tackles, makes tough yards. That's what they'll miss the most. So his point of view is, with these other backs, they're going to get whatever the line provides. Elliott was a special back who could create opportunities, as I said, on his own. So now if this offensive line is not performing to the expected standard of last year because they've got 2 new players in there and at left guard and at right tackle, then and Elliott's average per attempt has been affected by 2 yards per carry, at less than what he got last year. What's going to happen with Morris and McFadden? That would be my concern.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be fascinating on a lot of levels. I think this is an opportunity. It's a big opportunity for Jason Garrett if this happens. And if he is, in fact, suspended for 6 games, it's not only for Dak, a man who leads the NFL right now in endorsements. I mean, he is out there doing the Campbell's Chunky. Did you see him out there with those Highland Park kids? Ed, I think Dak might be rise to the occasion. And I'm not saying this is like a good thing or anything for the Cowboys. It would be a tough thing to lose Zeke. They do have an opportunity, I think, and I look at the schedule. I mean, sometimes rallying around a certain thing, like the adversity of not having your, one of the best tailbacks in the game, can be galvanizing. And I would not completely rule them out, is what I'm saying. If they get to if he has to miss these 6 games, but boy, they're going to fight this, and these attorneys are going to keep making money. You know what I mean? The billable hours are going to go up for everybody involved because, in a sense, if they go to New York and file that injunction there, or if this thing gets transferred back down to Texas, they sort of start from square one and have to start proving again. We didn't like the protocol. We didn't like the fact that one of the lead investigators in this case, or the co-lead investigator, was not allowed to go into that meeting with Roger Goodell. I mean, there's a lot. They've already done that in front of Judge Mazant, Baylor lawyer, I might add. Felt bad for Amos today, Judge Amos.
It was sort of relegated to meaningless status. His decision
Amos was. But no. I will say this. Judge Amos Mazant, is that his name? Yeah.
Yes.
I think some of his stuff will still be included, even if it's decided up there in New York. Some of what he went over, all his notes will be in there. And they do have the opportunity to kind of work off what Judge Mazant came up with. At least that's what I'm telling myself, that Judge Mazant will still have a hand in things. Hey, got a big legal scholar coming up. Boy, one of the best from Sports Illustrated is going to be joining us. I want to say this, fantasy football fans, listen up. Not too late to join the 500,000 people that have already downloaded Draft this season. Get in a real live snake draft, but you're done in only 5 minutes, and they last for just 1 week. You can join one right now. And my gosh, here we are going into week six already. The best part, play for cold hard cash, and get this, your chances of winning are 80% better than on the salary cap sites. You've heard of this. See people, oh gosh, you got to do a salary cap. 80% better chance of winning. All new players get a free entry into a real money draft when you make your first deposit, but you have to use the promo code. Ed, what is our promo code?
It's Dooms.
DOOMS. That's right. Play a real money game for free just by using the promo code
Dooms.
And gets even better. Draft is so sure you'll love it that they're even offering Dooms listeners a money-back guarantee up to $100.
$100.
Woo-hoo. Just search Draft in your app store or go to draft.com. Come play free right now with promo code DOOMS.
They didn't hire Dak to do that, huh? That's kind of surprising. Maybe Dak turned one down after all.
Campbell's chunky music. Michael McCann next.
So fresh from the Doomsday Podcast legal department, yet again, we welcome in Sports Illustrated's Michael McCann. Michael, you've become quite the go-to legal expert in situations involving the NFL and legal issues like the one that we continue to see here play out with Zeke Elliott. What are the important, in your mind, ramifications of today's decision, and what effect do you think it has on Zeke Elliott playing the next 6 weeks?
Yes, it's certainly a big victory for the NFL. This was the kind of decision that they were hoping they would get. That's why they hired somebody like Paul Clement, their lead attorney, who is one of the best attorneys around. And the significance is that now the NFL is in the driver's seat to prevail in the litigation, whatever way it could turn from this point on. And it could turn in several ways, but clearly the NFL is favored from this point on, and it now has the right under the order to impose the suspension. Whether the league chooses to do so now, I guess we'll find out soon, but they have the legal right to impose it.
They said his suspension starts immediately, even though this is the bye week. They could not wait but to take him out of the building at the Star, if not off the field.
They want him not even to come back from the break that he has.
So because the Fifth Circuit decision was strictly the result of issues with jurisdiction, which is, as I understand it, was because the NFLPA wrongly filed in a Texas court before Harold Henderson finished the arbitration appeal process, and doesn't involve issues of due process that have been raised by the NFLPA and Zeke Elliott. What does that mean? How significant do you think that is, that part of it hasn't been dealt with yet?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it hasn't been directly dealt with, but I think the language was pretty favorable for the NFL in terms of the spirit of the court's thinking. If I were the NFL, I would be really pleased with how the court looked at the issues. Certainly the dissenting judge, Judge Graves, focused on what you just mentioned in terms of Kia Roberts not appearing before Goodell, stuff like that. The majority didn't find that all that significant because obviously there was the timing issue, but the fact that it was so sided in favor of the NFL Yeah, I mean, there's a chance he can go back and try to appeal again. It's just, I think the dynamics are not good for Elliott.
All right, so we will see Zeke Elliott, perhaps what he'll try to do, or his attorneys, as they said, they're going to kind of think things over. If they try to get the injunction, it'll be in the Southern District Court there in New York. What are the chances? I saw it mentioned today. Is there any way that the NFLPA could get this back to the Metroplex or North Texas and basically kind of start over again from down here?
Yeah, I mean, there is a way of doing that. I don't think it's the likely path. And I think, in a way, a court may say he had the bite at the apple, and the fact is he didn't get it. So it would require the New York case to be dissolved, and the NFL at this point is in the driver's seat in New York. It's always been the best jurisdiction for the NFL because of the Brady decision. So as long as the case is there, I don't see any really viable way for Elliott to go through New York to get back to the NFL. It would require the end of the New York case and then going back to Texas. But I have a feeling a federal court would say, you've had this song and it didn't work. I could be wrong, but I would be pretty skeptical.
And obviously, the NFLPA and Elliott were trying to do all they could to avoid going to New York, as you mentioned, where the NFL eventually prevailed over Tom Brady, because that's the reason that they went to Texas first, right? They filed that motion in advance of the Harold Henderson decision because they didn't want the NFL to file in New York first. Exactly.
Yeah, New York is if it's litigated in New York, NFL wins.
And the NFL's already filed paperwork to have any other trials or hearings related to this heard in New York.
Yeah.
That's how confident the NFL is. So the NFL seemingly thinks that for all intents and purposes, they're going to win, right?
Oh, yeah. I think the NFL is pretty certain they're going to win this. The route for Elliott, he could try to go to the Supreme Court eventually. I mean, there are all these sort of Hail Mary type passes that he can throw, but none of them are really poised to win. At this point, the NFL's in the driver's seat.
Don't you sort of think that Gorsuch, I mean, he's really been doing some gerrymandering or whatever we call it. Wouldn't he like to get his hands on this case, Michael?
Yeah, I think they look at these cases with sort of a whimsical eye and just say, these are not that, they're really not that serious cases, right? And in arbitration, in Brady, to his credit, he had to come up with something. So the lawyers argued, well, the Brady case is really about arbitration rights for workers across the country. It just wasn't true because the NFL system of justice is very different from how most unionized employees deal with employer discipline. So Elliott's in the same boat. The NFL's kind of unique system of justice, and it's clearly a flawed one, but it makes it hard to argue that the case stands for something greater than just the specific case itself. So very unlikely, I think, that we'll see anything like this go to the Supreme Court.
So how ominous is all of this for players of any magnitude who object to any discipline that Roger Goodell levies under the CBA, given that if this stands, then he'll have beaten Tom Brady, he'll have beaten Adrian Peterson, and now Zeke Elliott. I mean, this is a pretty ominous outcome, isn't it, for players across the league, given that a lot of people believe, I don't know to what extent legal scholars believe, but his lawyers punched substantial holes in the NFL's whole investigative process.
Yeah, and it still didn't work. And I think that it really just comes down to Article 46 of the collective bargaining agreement being so one-sided in favor of the NFL that even if the NFL system is really flawed and bad, and pick whatever adjective you want to use, that doesn't have legal significance. And that's really the big problem for the players, is that they can criticize the system, but at the end of the day, their union agreed to it. And that's really the hurdle that the players haven't been able to get over. Their lawyers have done, I think, a great job trying to overcome a document that the union leadership signed, at least with respect to this personal conduct policy. The union agreed to a policy that's totally in favor of the league, and the lawyers now have to try to claw it back, but really hard to do.
It is hard to do. And Michael, before we let you go, I mean, it is interesting that Goodell continues to embarrass himself in some of the investigatory process. But as you said, the CBA always seems to be sitting there in his favor. No matter how much he botches it, it is still sort of the binding legal agreement that rules over everything. So, I mean, there's some embarrassment there, but then you can kind of come back and go, well, Brady, maybe this, maybe Adrian Peterson, he still can kind of cling to that in the end. And so, now we'll see about this, and now they'll all meet up and decide on what they're going to do from now moving forward on protests. So.
Well, I think it's going to be interesting now to see how big a bargaining issue does this become in the next round of CBA talks. It doesn't affect generally a high percentage of the players, and so it hasn't always been the priority that it seems like it should be in times like this, or when Tom Brady is, appealing his suspension. That no matter how flawed it is, it seems like you said, Michael, it withstands all scrutiny because it was negotiated and both sides signed off on the commissioner having this level of power. And will the players make it a big enough priority that they'll give up other things? I would say probably not, because 99% of the players never find themselves in a situation like Zeke Elliott does right now.
Yeah, if you're a player, these controversies get a lot of attention, but like you said, Matt, I mean, what 1%, 2% of players ever encounter this policy. If I were a player, I'd be way more focused on money and pension and disability, of things like that are going to affect everyone or a whole lot of people. This policy is interesting because it's so bad. I teach classes. It's like a student can get a D-, they still passed. And that's kind of like with Goodell. He can get D's on, these player disciplinary matters. A D is enough to get credit.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to fail if you're a Goodell at this. Mm-hmm. He's winning in part because the bar is so low. Yeah. But again, it seems unfair if you're a Cowboys fan, if you're a Patriots fan, if you're a Saints fan with Bountygate. Right, I mean, a Vikings fan with Peterson. I mean, there are all these fan bases that have seen how unfair this process is, but I don't know if that's going to do a lot when it gets to the bargaining table, where it's really about how much players making a lot of money in a short time of their life before their careers end.
Boy, a bunch of kids interested in law school are going to be signing up for Michael McCann's law class now, because at New Hampshire you can get a D and pass.
Oh no, you can.
He just said.
I can do that at Baylor. I did that.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
I
think maybe Civ
I did
Pro.
that in high school chemistry, but
yeah,
and I cheated to pass.
Oh,
with a D.
Ed, don't make these admissions at this point in your career. All right, Michael, we appreciate it. Did you notice, by the way, I have not been on Twitter. Did Goodell's wife tweet anything after this ruling went down?
I haven't looked at her Twitter account. I don't know. Are there other accounts we should look at?
Tell our listeners one more time how they can find you on Twitter.
Sure, McCann Sports Law.
It's a must read. Thanks again.
And it's me. It's me. I don't have my wife, posing as me or something. I mean, it's me.
That would be very untoward.
Did you know there's a Canadian composer named Michael McCann?
A video game composer, right?
I don't know. I was just looking at that.
He's the real deal with he does all the music in video games. So
for like Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell, he's a
okay. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So that's you.
No. Okay. I wish. I can't
be richer.
Hold the note at all. I'm like the opposite.
You'd be able to turn us down then.
That's right. Oh, he could do that already.
Thanks, Michael. We appreciate your time.
Yes.
Thanks, guys, for having me on. Talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you very much. Good night. All right, here's the deal. I want to talk to you about Bombfell. It's Bombfell. Frito and Ed Werder both have seen some of my Bombfell clothing that came in. I want to describe this to you. It was handpicked by my very own stylist, and your stylist will email you his or her selections, after which you'll have 48 hours to make any changes or even cancel altogether. You're in full control. Then you receive the clothes. You have 7 days to tell Bombfell what you want to keep and then send the rest back. Completely flexible. You can receive clothes when you want and can pause or cancel at any time. I love these things. I got this Johnny O golf shirt. Lots of comments to Cowboys the other night. It was good looking, and then some shorts. Werder saw them.
It must be nice to just wander home and have a little surprise waiting for you on the doorstep like that. Little outfit.
Ed, you saw the shorts. These are not like cargo. Oh, these are cargo shorts with a bunch of pockets in them. These are flat front, some beautiful, and I mean some of that. What do we call that?
A very high thread count.
I mean, it was a very high thread count. You're
silk.
right.
I think almost silk.
And listen to this. I opened the shipment, and it was like Christmas morning. It was big time to have this happen. Now, here's what
Something
you do.
for you and nothing for anyone else?
Nothing.
Is that how Christmas morning is at the Mosley home?
That's the way I like it. Okay, here's the special offer. Bombfell.com/doomsday. And here's what we've negotiated a special deal for you for $25 off your first purchase. I'm the one who negotiated this. Bombfell.com/doomsday. And I want to spell this out for you in case, because I speak sort of in East Texan accent. BOMBFELL.com. Okay, that's BOMBFELL.com. You got to do this. You got to try it. Ed, you would love this. A stylist. You already love all that Travis Matthews stuff. All of that's on the table. But what they'll do is you kind of give them a feeling, and you say, listen to the sign-up process. You give them your style preferences. You say, I like the 2 buttons, or I like this pair of jeans.
I like vertical stripes.
I like vertical stripes. You tell them, here's my measurements. I've got kind of a slender chest, but a larger waist. Now, maybe I'm speaking for myself. But you pay for what you keep. Return the rest. Shipping is free both ways.
Wow.
Bombfell. BOMBFELL. Get you some. And we continue on the Doomsday Podcast. Boy, it's been a great night to get some legal help out there. A lot of us in need of it. And Daniel Wallach, who, Ed Werder, he is so in demand. They flew him across the country. He's out there at Marquette Law School, one of the many law schools that turned me down across the country. And he's doing a little seminar there, a round table. Tomorrow he's doing a speech. But, Daniel, I know you were in the air when some of this went down today. And federal appeals court there in New Orleans rules in favor of the NFL, basically, and will impose that 6-game suspension for Zeke Elliott. Okay, everybody around here is wondering, and you had a tweet not long after that really was of interest about could this thing get transferred back to Texas. But before we get into all the legal machinations, explain to us in your mind, in your great legal mind, what this all means and where you think this is headed. And most importantly for Cowboys fans right now, when is the next time they will see Zeke Elliott on the field?
Well, they're likely to see Zeke Elliott in a courtroom before they see him on the field. I want to make clear that today's ruling from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit was not a ruling for the NFL on the merits of the case. The court simply ruled on the subject of jurisdiction, meaning which court the controversy should be litigated in. And the sole issue today was that the union's lawsuit filed before the award was issued was too soon. And as a result, the court that gave the injunction to Elliott didn't even have subject matter jurisdiction. So it's basically a do-over. We're going to go through a replay of the same kind of, motion for an injunction and a restraining order. We're just going to have that play out either in New York next week, or if possible, the union might try to amend their complaint in Texas and urge the New York judge to transfer the lawsuit back to Texas, where, quite frankly, all the work has been done.
So you call this a do-over, so whose advantage is that? The NFL's or Zeke Elliott's?
The conventional wisdom is that the NFL, is going to be the favorite in the Southern District of New York because of the Deflategate ruling from 2016 that essentially reinforced Roger Goodell's disciplinary powers under Article 46, and that should foreclose any attempt to undermine the arbitrator's ruling. But I think this is one of those cases that is what I would consider to be an outlier, because this is really a case about domestic violence that is predicated or based on the testimony and interviews given by a witness who the NFL isn't even making available in the arbitration. So the NFL had this cooperating witness during their investigation. And now that they've suspended him or suspended Elliott based on the witness's testimony, they refuse to make her available in the arbitration. And then to make matters worse, the league wouldn't even turn over the notes that were taken by the league investigators of their interviews with Tiffany Thompson. So, this is a classic case of not being able to confront your accuser. Now, in the Deflategate case, the same argument was raised by Brady and was rejected by the Second Circuit because the witness in that case was Jeffrey Pash, and he had a subordinate role, a less important role in the Wells investigation. I mean, he didn't really write the report or conduct the investigation. He was titled as the co-author.
But he's legal counsel for the NFL.
I'm sorry?
He's legal counsel for the NFL.
Yeah, he's legal counsel for the NFL, senior vice president. In the Second Circuit's opinion, his testimony wasn't so important to Tom Brady's case. But in a domestic violence case involving a suspension that is based on the testimony of basically one person, to not make that one person available during the arbitration kind of undermines the notion of fundamental fairness. And the term fundamental fairness is what is considered to be an exception to the general rule that arbitration should be upheld and courts should not interfere with arbitration decisions. Fundamental fairness is one of the statutory exceptions to that notion, and I quite frankly, you can't get a stronger case of arbitration being fundamentally unfair when you're denying the accused the opportunity to cross-examine his accuser or even have access to the notes that were the foundation of the NFL's discipline against him.
All right, with all that said...
I don't think the result changes. I really don't.
You mean you're pessimistic that Zeke Elliott could prevail?
I mean, for the same reasons that Elliott was able to secure a preliminary injunction from Amos Mazant in the Eastern District of Texas, I think he's got as strong, if not a stronger likelihood of success in the belly of the beast in New York, where the NFL is going to rely on their home advantage and this Deflategate ruling to say that decision forecloses any relief that Elliott is seeking. I think Elliott's chances of getting an injunction are stronger because the same problems underlying the arbitration proceeding simply don't go away merely because the venue changes. And now you're allowing the NFL to impose a suspension during the middle of the season. Well, if there was irreparable harm to Elliott and the Cowboys at the beginning of the season, it is like twofold in the middle of the season, because it would not only disrupt the same number of games for Elliott, but it would potentially crater the Cowboys' regular season. And the most important point to remember is that Elliott is going to be seeking a preliminary injunction next week. He is not asking the court to rule on the merits of the case. He's asking for a maintaining of the status quo, so that he can have the opportunity, if he were to prevail on appeal, to not have to miss any games.
Okay.
Because once the suspension is meted out, if he were to win on appeal, he'll never get the games back.
Yeah, in the threshold of what he needs in seeking that preliminary injunction is not that high. I mean, walk us through that. What he will have to prove in that hearing in New York to get the injunction, because there is a belief, kind of what you said, the conventional wisdom seemed to be after this case, the NFL has the hammer now. They're back in charge. They're in the driver's seat, I've heard some people say. But now, how much does he need to prove at that preliminary to get one of these, the preliminary injunction to basically keep playing?
Well, he's going to have to show the same four elements that he had to prove in the Texas federal court last month. He'll have to show, one, that he is likely to succeed on the merits of his case. Now, that is not the same thing as a certainty of winning. It is just a likelihood or might be a substantial likelihood of success. That's going to be the key element here, because the other elements that he'll have to show are irreparable harm. And as I've stated earlier, being suspended for 6 games and then later winning on appeal does him no good, because the games will never be recaptured. So on the second element of irreparable harm, he's got that. The third thing that he would have to demonstrate is that the harm to Elliott from missing 6 games is greater than the harm that the NFL would suffer if the injunction were granted. In my opinion, the NFL would suffer 0 irreparable harm, because their argument has been that it would kind of undermine the NFL's disciplinary process. Well, that's kind of I would say that's somewhat speculative or an attenuated harm. Nothing is quite as harmful as the harm to the player from being forced to sit games he'll never recover, were he to later win on appeal. So he's got elements 2 and 3 in the bag. And then the fourth element that Elliott would have to show next week, and this is going to be set for a hearing in a New York federal court, most likely by the end of next week. The fourth element is that it would be in the public interest to grant an injunction in favor of Elliott. And the public interest element is one of the lowest threshold elements that he would have to satisfy, I believe. Being wrongfully accused and being forced to serve a suspension improperly would certainly disserve the public interest to force him to endure that. So Elliott's chances for success are going to hinge on that first element as to whether he can persuade the New York federal judge that he is likely to succeed on the merits of his lawsuit to vacate the arbitration award. And that will come down to the issue of fundamental fairness, and then the NFL's attempts to conceal the importance of Keir Roberts. So I think Judge Mazant's ruling on the preliminary injunction, while it is vacated, I think still looms large, because it provides the New York judge with a roadmap. So, too, was Judge James Graves's dissenting opinion from the Fifth Circuit order today. He also determined that the NFL's conduct of the arbitration deprived Elliott of fundamental fairness. So you've had only 2 judges address the issue of fundamental fairness. Both have sided with Elliott and the PA, and I believe that those decisions or those rulings, while they may have been vacated or in a dissent, are still relevant to how the New York judge might address the motion.
All right, talking to Daniel Wallach, who has, he's been all over this and has been really good. In fact, some of his predictions, he's been nailing these things as we go on.
Until today.
You didn't expect this, huh?
That's okay. No, you've been all over it. Now, you are a gaming expert as well, so I don't know if that makes you a betting man, but if you were, and by the way, that's what he's going to talk to his Marquette law students tomorrow. It's about gaming and that whole industry, and there's sports betting is obviously a huge thing. If you were going to put a percentage on whether or not he's going to be granted this injunction, it sounds like to me, I don't want to put words in your mouth, you think there's about 70% chance that he's going to get that injunction?
Higher. There's no such thing as 100%. That would be foolish. But I would put his chances of success at the 75% range. Okay. And the key is that he doesn't have to demonstrate a guarantee of success, only a likelihood of success. And the the shortfalls in the arbitration with the exclusion of the notes and the and more importantly, the NFL had a cooperating witness during its investigation. Tiffany Thompson was all over the investigation. She met with NFL investigators, I believe, 6 times. And while the NFL cannot compel her or subpoena her to testify during the arbitration, they could have at least made the effort. They could have asked. And the NFL made no effort to make Ms. Thompson available and fought the NFLPA tooth and nail to keep her out of the arbitration proceeding. And if you're going to suspend someone on basically what is a quasi-criminal accusation that he committed an act of domestic violence based upon largely the testimony of the victim, well, the victim's testimony is critical to a fair and to a fundamentally fair arbitration. So much so that to deny Elliott and the PA the opportunity to interview her, to depose her, to cross-examine her, or even to look at the notes deprives him of a fair hearing. So it's 75%.
If let me ask you this: you're very confident, like you said, 75% chance you think that Elliott, even if this is her next step is heard in the in New York courtrooms, will prevail. Why is it then that the NFL, PA, and Elliott's legal team did so much to try to avoid going to New York? Because that's what this is really all about, right? The Fifth Circuit in New Orleans got involved and ruled that jurisdiction was the issue here because Elliott inappropriately filed a motion before the arbitration process was completed, right? So, and he only did that because they were fearful of going to New York next, correct?
Well, it didn't mean that New York was going to be a sure loser. It's like any lawyer who makes a choice between which venue he wants to have his case litigated in. If you're representing a player who resides in Texas and plays for a Texas team, would you rather litigate that case all the way across the United States, or would you rather possibly get the home cooking of a local forum? I mean, obviously you're not going to be getting necessarily a Dallas Cowboys fan who's going to just rubber stamp a ruling in favor of Elliott, but it's commonplace in all types of litigation for a local client to prefer to litigate in his home venue as opposed to the home venue of your adversary. I mean, the National Football League is headquartered in New York City, and as Ezekiel Elliott plays in Dallas. It made perfect sense that the PA would want to litigate this case where the player resides and where the player works. I don't think all hope is lost. Elliott is still was able to play the first 5 weeks of the regular season, and now the Players Association is armed not only with a brand new slate, but they have the benefit of Judge Mazant's preliminary injunction and today's ruling on the dissent side from Judge Graves, which made plain that the NFL deprived Elliott of fundamental fairness by excluding the notes of the accuser and the testimony of the accuser.
Let me ask you my last question.
My gosh, Ed. I mean, this man needs to get some rest.
All right. We'll let him go.
I'm okay. I don't expect Kate to be calling for a few more minutes. I have to keep the phone available for Kate Haropoulos.
Kate Haropoulos of the Dallas Morning News, who introduced you to
the bat
fame.
line.
Yes. Hey, so here's my question. You said likely to succeed eventually in the overall case is what he is relying on next. So how likely do you think he is to ultimately succeed and win this case against the NFL in general?
Well, look, I'm not trying to be a Cowboys booster here. I have no stake in this. I happen to be a Giants fan. So
well, you're shopping for a new team to support then at 0-5.
Congrats on that.
Yeah, so I'm basically shopping for a new team, but I analyze these issues through the prism and through the lens of the law, and I've read many arbitration decisions, and I've probably read every decision that has come out on the issue of fundamental fairness. And it's true that it's the exception rather than the rule that an arbitration gets vacated. In fact, the numbers are shockingly low. They're less than 10% of the time, maybe even less than 5% of the time. But this goes to the heart of the ability to confront your accuser. In one sense, Jeffrey Pash was never Tom Brady's accuser, but Tiffany Thompson is Ezekiel Elliott's only accuser, and the issue of fundamental fairness is so much more prominent in this particular case than it is in any of the other decisions I've read in the federal courts, in the number of federal court decisions I've read, and I'm pretty confident that the outcome will go in Elliott's favor, even though this case is being litigated in the NFL's home forum, and the NFL has won case after case after case on the issue of deference to arbitrators. But it wasn't too long ago that the NFL was on a very long losing streak in federal court. Before the Brady and the Peterson decisions, it had lost, the Ray Rice decision in front of arbitrator Barbara Jones. Paul Tagliabue ruled against the NFL in Bountygate. The NFL had a terrible record in federal court, and I don't think that this arbitration record in the Ezekiel Elliott case, is very flattering for how the NFL conducts its proceedings. And if ever there were a classic case of fundamental unfairness, I think it exists in this case, and it could be litigated in New York or Texas, and the outcome shouldn't matter, that Elliott will prevail on his motion for a preliminary injunction next week, largely because the issue of irreparable harm is so strong that I believe that the court might even apply somewhat of a sliding scale, because the danger to Elliott, were he to get denied the injunction and have to serve the suspension, it means that he cannot ever get those games back, even if he were to later prevail on appeal. And I think that issue is so prominent that would likely tip the scales in Elliott's favor next week, especially in the middle of a season.
Yeah. No, this was, by the way, thank you so much. That was really good. The thing we like about you, Daniel, is that it doesn't really matter what everybody else is saying or conventional wisdom. I mean, you kind of shoot from the hip. And even if you're kind of out there in the wilderness a little bit, and you've been right quite a bit, so I appreciate that. Usually, we only have one great legal mind on this podcast.
Michael McMahon was definitely far more pessimistic.
I'm speaking of myself. Yeah, Ed. I don't know who this McCann is you speak of, but yeah.
Oh, Michael McCann is the best. He's somebody that I look up to, but it doesn't mean he's going to be right 100% of the time.
Yeah, y'all are both scaring me. Most attorneys don't like each other, and you guys have both said incredible things about each other. So
this is what you could have been.
Me?
Matt. You could have been this.
I know. There's just more money. There's more money in podcasting, quite honestly.
My sense of this is that this is a particularly strong case for Elliott, and I know the naysayers are usually reacting in a reflexive way because of the pessimism, in overturning arbitrations. It is so rare. It happens so infrequently, but it doesn't mean that it never happens. And if you were to try to isolate the perfect case to buck the general rule, I think this is that case. Right. But the NFL had a slam dunk case as long as they didn't screw up the procedures. If I were in the NFL's position, or if I were in Henderson's position, I would have allowed the PA to have every piece of evidence it wanted. You want the notes? Here it is. You want Miss Thompson to testify? We have no objection. If the NFL had done everything right to make all of the relevant and material evidence available, here's what the outcome would have been. It would have been the same damn outcome, a 6-game suspension, and the Players Association wouldn't have had any arguments. So what the league did here, and what Henderson did here, is potentially rescue, defeat from the jaws of victory by trying to be too heavy-handed in how they litigated.
All right, hey, Daniel, we got to get going so Kate can call you. And we both live down here in the Dallas area, and have read a lot of your analysis in the morning news. They've leaned on you heavily.
Great Twitter follow. I follow him on Twitter.
Yeah. He's a good one. He's a good one, this Daniel Wallach, and I'm just glad we've
rising star.
No, he's already a star. Thank you very much, and good luck with the speech in the morning there at Marquette. It is Daniel Wallach who does such a great job analyzing all of this. Gaming expert, sports law expert. Thank you, Daniel. Been a fascinating emergency podcast, Ed. We had two dueling legal scholars and divergent opinions. And this happens. We saw the ruling there out of New Orleans. The Fifth Circuit had a two versus one. There was a dissenting opinion there. And in this case, Michael McCann, the noted Sports Illustrated legal scholar, has been with him for a while now, thought the NFL's in the driver's seat. And we talked to Daniel Wallach, who's been so good on this, done a lot of stuff in the morning news, Dallas Morning News recently. And he believes there's a 75% chance that in a preliminary injunction that Zeke Elliott will likely be seeking in New York, that will be granted.
And he thinks ultimately Zeke Elliott has a very strong chance of winning the case.
So two very different thoughts on that. And I want to say one thing tonight, and it's been a great emergency podcast, but look at my skin. You've seen me recently, and I've kind of gotten a little shaggy. Pretty smooth right now, and I want to thank Harry's for that. Harry's Razors just do an incredible job. And this morning, in fact, boy, a lot of times my skin's so sensitive, I got to go with the grain, against the grain. There I was with that beautiful orange handle, the ergonomic handle.
I can't wait to get one of these.
Yeah, we're going to get one in your hands. And by the way, Harry's is so confident you're going to love your blades. They'll give you your trial shave set for free when you sign up at harrys.com/doomsday, DOOMSDAY. Just pay for shipping. Harry's all about great shave at a fair price, which is why over 3 million guys have switched to Harry's.
It'll be 3,000,001 as soon as I get mine.
Yeah, you're going to get involved in this. They got their own German factory, over 100 years of blade-making experience to ensure the highest quality. All products are backed by a 100% quality guarantee, and they offer their blades at half the price of the leading 5-blade razor, selling directly to you over the internet. Here's this free trial offer from Harry's. $13 value for free. When you sign up, just cover shipping. Your free trial includes that ergonomic razor handle I talked about. It's orange. I've been with Harry's for a long time. It used to be like a sort of a silver. I like this orange look they're going with. 5 precision-engineered blades, a lubricating strip and trimmer blade, rich lathering shave gel, and a travel blade cover. And again, to get your free trial, Ed, go to harrys.com/doomsday. Right now, that's harrys.com/doomsday. You know why Harry's keeps coming back to us? Because so many of our Doomsday podcast listeners are getting involved with Harry's. And right now you kind of have a goatee working, and you need a shave. You need a rest. This is one of the first
This is what you should look like when you come in for an emergency podcast. Because by definition, it's not expected, and you can't possibly look your best, and you don't either. But you do look clean-shaven.
Thank you. Yeah. I don't look my best, but I do look clean-shaven. I like how you put that. And it's been a remarkable evening. We've had 2 legal scholars on, 3 if you count me. We've had quite a night. Last thoughts as we say goodnight to everybody on this emergency podcast that we needed to have with that Fifth Circuit ruling, which, as Daniel Wallach quickly corrected me, was not a ruling for the NFL. It was just for jurisdiction. Jurisdiction needs to happen in New York. Michael McCann thought that was a big win for the NFL. They're in the driver's seat. Daniel Wallach had different thoughts and thinks that actually thinks that Zeke Elliott will be able to win this preliminary injunction. Ed, final
thoughts.
Which
means he would continue to play.
Correct.
So against the 49ers, if you listen to Daniel Wallach and you believe his version of events, expect that Zeke Elliott's going to continue to be on the field starting with next week's game at the 49ers. I thought it was really compelling. The quote that caught my attention was when he was criticizing the NFL for the way it conducted the investigation and the access it did not allow to Zeke Elliott to face his accuser or even have notes from the interviews with her. And he said, quote, the NFL had a slam dunk case against Zeke Elliott if it didn't screw up the procedures. And so his view is they've so badly and so egregiously missed on following protocol that he thinks that Zeke Elliott has a legitimate chance of winning the entire case. Something we haven't seen happen by a marquee player against the NFL anytime recently.
Used to be, there was a guy, and I think he's still around, Judge Doty.
David Doty.
David Doty up there in Minneapolis or Minnesota, and he used to be...
he was their guy.
He was kind of a player-friendly, NFLPA-friendly, but we hadn't heard from Judge Doty in a while. Ed, thanks for coming in this evening. Mark Frito Freeman doing a great job at Frito Nation Productions. Man, never closes for business. I think he's got another podcast later tonight, some kind of fantasy thing. Appreciate everybody who's been a part of this. Thanks for all our partners, Draft.com, Harry's Razors, Bombfell. And then, and by the way, it's BOMBFELL. So great.
I've got that committed to memory by now.
Get yourself a personal stylist and get involved in that. And then want to remind everybody, go to your podcast app and then just put in there Doomsday and sign up with us. And we love having you and appreciate everybody
who's
been a part of it. It is a free subscription. Thanks to everybody who's been a part of this. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Shining, stockings have been hung. You're praying for your daughter, lighting candles for your son. They're living in the city now, you don't see them anymore. This year will not be like the ones before. And the streets are all but empty, the bars have all shut down, and it's hard to find a friend goes. Once you were a young girl with lovers by the score, money by the handful, you'd never wanted more. But men tend to leave you as time has its way, and they leave behind little mouths to feed and raise. And the days go by so slowly when it used to go so fast. Whiskey does not taste as good when you only pour one glass.
Look around. You can find cars like these on AutoTrader. New cars, used cars, electric cars, maybe even flying cars. Okay, no flying cars, but as soon as they get invented, they'll be on AutoTrader. Just you wait. AutoTrader.
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.